A couple of questions, Ashish. Your last two films, I found the temporal structure very interesting. I mean, you know what is happening, and yet every time it gives you a kind of a surprise. Two questions related to that. One, that reverse time flow that takes place a lot of time. was it was it a part of the structure from the beginning, or was it Pankaj's contribution also to some extent? Because I saw that he was the editor in between.
No, that film is probably my most difficult film. It took me nearly 12 years to make it. It starts with the footage that you see in the beginning, which was shot in 1996. It was one of the single short films I was doing, which Amrit mentions, etc., which I haven't shown here. It dealt with this particular footage. The whole series I made a series of 7 films, out of which eventually 4 made it up into this form called etc., which is the film that Amrit talked about being rejected in a film festival at MIF. So this was the 7th, I think, which the idea was to do a Ganpati Visarjan on, this is 1997's Ganpati Anant Chaturdashi. Which was, and this was a very close friend, Girish Dahiwale, who I don't know if some of you are familiar with the Indian art circles. He was a contemporary of artists like Riaz Komu and Jatish Kallap and Krishnachari Bose and others. And I used to hang out in the same circles in the mid-90s. So I spoke to Girish, and we were very good friends, and we decided to do this collaborative thing where he would walk. But somehow it just didn't work, this particular footage, exactly this particular footage of 2.5 minutes. It just didn't work, and I shelved it, and a year later he committed suicide. And I had this footage of this friend, which became something like a very deep sense of memory for me. And I had it for many, many years, and I was thinking from the day Girish died, I knew I had to make a film. But I knew I didn't want to make a film on Girish or about Girish. And it just evolved. It took me many, many years. So it starts with what you see in the film, with myself getting my head shaven. And I shaved my head 3 times over the course of 12 years. And in the process of this, I went to US, and in US I started collecting old negative, unexposed old negative from eBay, which is, therefore you see, if you look at the quality of these films, it's very granular. The grains are very, very grainy. It's because, like, most of this film, especially Vakratunda, was shot on negatives which are about 15 years old. Unexposed negative, which I bought from eBay, and we exposed it, which was a very conscious act. And along with this process, I bought an old 16mm camera, which was a camera which FD used. Not Bolex, Bolue, which FD started using in the 70s. It's a camera which is a French 16mm camera, which the history of cinema verite is very closely associated with camera. It's a small camera. What this camera could do was something amazing. It could shoot in reverse. Yeah, this is probably the only 16 camera of that time which could shoot in reverse. So I bought this camera for about $200, which is like, what, 8,000, 9,000 rupees. And I, very specifically because this camera could shoot in reverse. And I shot, so it's a very, very deliberate, conscious process of shooting in reverse. And all these things that you see, where the play is that it's in reverse, but in cinema it is, it's the opposite. It's supposed to be magic. It is miracle. And I think at least that's what it is supposed to be miracle. Things are supposed to fly. The man is supposed to walk. And it's only possible because what it does is this twist of that it's not a miracle, but still it's a miracle. And what I want to do, and which I suspect must have happened with you, is that you slip into that. That is exactly what I want. Between your knowledge that this is mechanical and your viewing that it is miraculous, that you slip.
Just one more question. See, you actually tell the viewer about the suicide that Girish had actually committed. Now, that seems to be a very personal personal touch to the whole thing, because otherwise the viewer doesn't really require that information at all in the film. The film has an existence completely independent of that. So why that?
It's again the space between knowing and not knowing, which in Vakratunda is definitely unlike Pankaj. This is the second film that Pankaj edited for me. The early one was a feature film, and we spent about 3 weeks working on it, and we edited out of 6 hours of footage shot over close to 12 years, and we were talking about should we put a title card, and I think we both decided it's important to tell that this is a personal film, but yet it is not personal.
But I was wondering if you could talk about sort of the performance aspects of walking through the streets and sort of people's reactions. So sort of the art that you're making in real time at the moment of filmmaking as opposed to what we're seeing here in the record.
Yeah, I mean, like in the first 2 films in a very different way, because the first film is about this man dressing up like Kali, and that's related to a very it's a folk, especially a low caste folk tradition, a Dalit folk tradition in Bengal, where young men, it's essentially a very gender specific male, low caste, Dalit, rural, who dress up like gods and goddesses. I would suspect it has the very act of transformation is a sacred act, which is what you see in the next film, in Kathikali, the very act of transformation. And you would see that in almost all shamanistic culture, the very act of dressing means that you are becoming a different person. So what I did with that film, with Kalighat, was to pick up this folk moment, which for me, I resonated with my own life in Calcutta, where you see these kind of people, but also within the history of Indian cinema, Hrithik Ghatak, in his most brilliant moment in Shubhanarekha, if some of you might remember, has this footage of a small, of a child coming in this abandoned aerodrome somewhere in Bengal. And I think what I'm trying to do is that I'm relating to my own past, both my cultural past, and let's say the history of cinema, the history of technology, and I'm very aware of these things, and these films emerge from that process of the burden of past, either it's religious, cultural, technological, ethnographic. So the Kalighat fetish footage of what he talks about, of these people walking on this beach, was exactly the same day when I shot Girish. It's the same day, it's the same 400 feet of road. So it's that, except it's been used in 2 separate films nearly 11 years apart. So there is a definite relationship, but no, it was not conscious at all. I have been making films on my own money, and I have, over the course, I started making my first, made my first film in 1995, and I'm just finishing my 4th feature film. Over the course of, 1994 to 2012, 18 years, I have spent about 80 lakhs of my own money. How did I get that money? I can also tell you that, not a secret at all. Kalighat Fetish took me, it was made in 1999. It took me 2 lakhs to make that film at that time. It was shot in 16mm and the whole 16mm framework. And I saved money for working for about 3.5 years to make that film. Then the other films I made, I went to US, I got a scholarship. I'm like a very Spartan person. People save money to buy houses and buy cars. I just save money to make films. In India, there are 2 forms of films that have been produced. One is within the framework of capital and market. The other one is what FD and NFDC is in the framework of state. So if you're thinking about looking at the framework of state, so you have FD producing films, 8,000 films, and NFDC has produced close to about 200 feature films without the market. It doesn't need the market. Until 1996, yes, right, 1996, I think, the union, that it was imperative that cinema halls, the 12,000 cinema halls, show FD films. So there was an audience, but not a market. In the same case of NFDC, NFDC was funding was funding films, but it never cared about the market, and which had it had a debilitating effect on filmmakers of that generation who could not show their films. But you see, so there are these two models. One is a model funded by the state, which doesn't care about the market. The other is a model funded by capital, which only cares about the market, right? So both these forms of funding, for me, is a problem. One, for example, if you're dealing with a market, you cannot make your own films. However radical filmmakers like Anurag Kashyap and Vishal Bharadwaj would want to believe they are, they're fundamentally sucking up to the market forces. On the other hand, you have state-funded films, which are producing, I would say the state-funded films, and this is not because I'm standing in FD, I think the state-funded films have produced probably the most radical films this country has produced. Not just this country, if you look at the whole of East European example, Soviet Union, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, the finest cinema of the 1960s and 70s was funded by the state. And that to a totalitarian state, right? So for me, when I was emerging, I was thinking about cinema, I figured out very early on that it is money. Money is, there are three things about cinema. You have skill, you need capital, and you need idea. Skill, you go to FTI, NS or FTI, and you get it. Nowadays it's more easy. You just go on YouTube, you know how to run an iPhone camera, and you can make a film. The skill is gone. With the skill disappearing, all that remains is capital. Capital is also slowly dwindling because today you can make a feature film with about 2 lakhs or even less. So the crisis of capital has also disappeared. I think the crisis is only with the idea, which is a different ballgame because that's something. So for me, I have been very careful about trying to fund my own film myself. And it's becoming better. I'm like, in the last 3 years, I've made 3 feature films. Because now I can make films much faster than ever.